Dexter was a man who had an uncontrollable desire to kill, yet Harry's code restrained him to only kill other killers who had escaped the justice system. Whilst he came close several times, Dexter spared the lives of 6 people because they did not fit the code. The first person Dexter chose not to kill was Paul Bennett, Rita's abusive ex-husband. Paul was a wicked man who had served 18 months in prison for assaulting and abusing his wife, Rita. He was troubled, drawn to the idea of having a family and children, and ultimately proving why some people deserve neither. When Paul was released from prison due to overcrowding, Rita was devastated, knowing her life would once again be filled with his harassment and toxicity. One of Paul's first actions after leaving prison was to pick up Cody and Aster from school without informing Rita, leaving her furious and reaffirming her desire to keep him out of their lives. When he met Dexter, Paul was immediately confrontational and aggressive, revealing himself as a threat to the family's stability. Soon after, Paul escalated things with Dexter, questioning his involvement with Rita and continuing to provoke him.
Is that it?
Things took a darker turn when Paul showed up one afternoon, drunk, and attempted to assault Rita again. She was forced to defend herself with a baseball bat, desperate to keep him at bay. Yet despite the clear threat he posed, Paul managed to escape any legal consequences due to the loopholes in the system, leaving Rita feel powerless and unprotected. It all came to a head when Paul barged into Dexter and Rita's kitchen, verbally insulting and antagonizing Rita once again. This time, however, Paul got the reaction he wanted. Dexter's temper flared, and in a rare moment of impulse, he struck Paul with a frying pan, knocking him unconscious. In that moment, Dexter considered killing Paul to permanently rid Rita's life of his toxic presence. However, despite his hatred and disdain for Paul, Dexter ultimately chose to spare him, as Paul did not fit Harry's code. However, this didn't mean that Dexter was just going to let Paul go without consequences. Dexter took Paul's unconscious body back to his motel and injected him with to make him look like he had relapsed. This manipulation sent Paul back to prison, effectively removing him from Rita's life without violating the code. However, Dexter's actions had unforeseen consequences. While in prison, Paul realized Dexter had set him up and tried to warn Rita, but she dismissed his claims, choosing to trust Dexter over Paul's accusations. Paul later died in prison during a violent altercation, an outcome indirectly resulting from Dexter's decision. Me personally, I wish Dexter would have killed him himself, but I was still glad to see Paul gone for good. And if you were too, make sure to subscribe. This incident was one of the first times Dexter's actions led to a tragic outcome. It showed the blurred lines in his sense of morality and hinted at how personal attachments could make it harder for him to follow the code. The next person Dexter almost killed but ultimately chose to spare was Jeremy Downs, a troubled young man who had killed his rapist at the age of 15, resulting in him serving 4 years in juvenile detention. Upon Jeremy's release, Dexter took an immediate interest in him, eager to determine if he had the traits of a killer or was someone who needed to be permanently removed from society. Dexter suspected that Jeremy, like himself, might have a compulsion to kill. His suspicions seemed confirmed when he followed Jeremy to a marketplace and saw him buying a knife and recklessly swinging it around in public.
Easy, kid.
As Dexter continued to stalk him, he saw Jeremy lure a young man into a secluded area under the pretense of watching alligators. The setting and approach mirrored Jeremy's first killing, and after Dexter saw Jeremy draw for his knife, he knew he was going to strike again. Dexter intervened, stopping what he saw as an inevitable repeat of history, and the two boys quickly scrambled away. For Dexter, this confirmed that Jeremy met the criteria of Harry's code. Later that night, Dexter confronted Jeremy alone in the halfway house, intending to kill him to prevent further harm. However, Jeremy revealed that his first killing had been in self-defense.
You're mine now.
What do you want?
Silence.
You gonna fuck me because I killed the last guy who raped me?
This confession completely changed Dexter's perspective, making him realize that Jeremy was a traumatized young man, not a monster deserving punishment. Little did he know how wrong he could be. Instead of killing Jeremy, Dexter advised him to control his violent urges, suggesting he should only harm those who deserve it if he couldn't resist. However, despite this chance at redemption, Jeremy's violent tendencies resurfaced, and he killed again, eventually leading to his arrest by Sergeant Dokes. In a final encounter while in custody, Jeremy confessed to Dexter that he felt empty inside and killed to try to fill something. Unable to find peace, Jeremy ultimately took his own life in a way similar to how he killed his victims. Jeremy's tragic end had a profound impact on Dexter, revealing the dangers of showing mercy outside of Harry's code. By sparring Jeremy, Dexter had unintentionally allowed him to kill again, and his mercy ultimately proved futile when Jeremy took his own life. The next person was a similar story. Dexter's decision not to kill Sergeant James Stokes presented one of the greatest moral dilemmas in the show. Stokes had a sharp instinct for danger, and from the beginning, he sensed that something was off about Dexter. Eventually, Stokes discovered that Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher, even catching him in the act. However, his attempt to bring Dexter to justice failed, and he ended up captured and locked in a cage, unable to expose Dexter's dark secret. Dexter faced a difficult choice. He could kill Stokes and protect his secret, violating Harry's code, or he could turn himself in and spare Stokes' life. This internal battle intensified as Dexter contemplated turning himself in rather than compromising his moral guidelines. However, Dexter found a third option: frame Stokes and let Miami Metro do the rest. He planted evidence that would lead others to conclude that Stokes, not Dexter, was the serial killer. This choice allowed Dexter to both keep his secret intact and spare Stokes' life, as no one would believe Stokes once he was caught. The situation took a dark turn when Dexter's ex-girlfriend, Lila, discovered Stokes locked in the cabin.
Poor thing, all alone.
I'm okay. Just open the gate.
Not you. Dexter.
Believing she was helping Dexter, she killed Stokes by setting the cabin on fire, ending his life. Though Dexter hadn't intended Stokes' death, it cast a dark shadow over his actions, reminding him of the serious consequences of even indirect choices. While Stokes' death protected Dexter's secret, it also haunted him, revealing the risk of manipulating others' lives. Stokes was one of my favorite characters, so I was very annoyed when he died. Speaking of, who was your favorite character? Comment down below. Dexter's choice to not help Miguel kill Alan Wolfe showed his strong commitment to Harry's code, and increasing the tension between the two. Ellen, a determined defense attorney, was known for defending clients with shady backgrounds and often helping them avoid conviction. There's always been tension between the two, as she accused Miguel of using unethical tactics like hiding evidence, intimidating witnesses, and tampering with juries. To Miguel, she was a blood-sucking, soulless enabler who let killers walk free.
Real reason she's blindfolded, so she doesn't have to watch everything she stands for get pissed on by someone like Ellen Wolfe.
Miguel's disdain for Ellen intensified after her client, Albert Chung, killed a young college student and walked free, and he urged Dexter to view her as a legitimate target. Initially, Dexter considered the idea, wondering if Ellen's actions might indirectly put others at risk, which could, in a twisted way, make her fit the code.
You look the time.
Do I see sheets of plastic in your future?
However, as he observed her more closely, Dexter concluded that she did not fit the code's criteria. She was not a killer and had not directly harmed innocents. She was simply just doing her job. Dexter's decision to spare Ellen highlighted his commitment to the ethical boundaries of his code, even as Miguel pressured him to kill her for personal reasons. Dexter saw that Miguel's anger towards Ellen was driven by ego and resentment, not a pursuit of justice. However, despite Dexter's choice, Miguel took matters into his own hands, killing Ellen in a violent, impulsive act and burying her in an unmarked grave. Ellen's murder marked a turning point for Dexter, exposing Miguel's lack of restraint and his disregard for any moral code. It showed Dexter that his restraint had been in vain, and underscored the risk of comprising his own ethics, ultimately reinforcing his commitment to strictly follow Harry's code. I mentioned this in the previous video, but isn't it strange how everyone Dexter chooses to spare ends up dead anyways? But the next person would be the first person to actually survive. Dexter's decision not to kill Raman Prado, even after Raman went on a reckless spree, demonstrated Dexter's restraint and his ability to feel empathy, even towards someone who had posed a potential threat. Raman, a lieutenant sheriff and the hot-headed middle brother of the Prado family, was consumed by grief and anger after the deaths of his brother, Oscar and Miguel, both of whom had fallen victim to Dexter's darkness. This trauma drove Raman into a downward spiral of rage and alcoholism, causing him to lash out at those around him, including Dexter, whom he had suspected was involved in his family's tragedies. Although Raman was correct in his suspicions, his behavior that followed was completely irrational. In his grief, Raman became increasingly erratic, following and intimidating Dexter, and in a shocking turn of events, even pulling a gun on him at his wedding rehearsal.
I should put a bullet in your head. In front of everybody. So they can see what it's like to lose someone.
Which ultimately led to his arrest. To Dexter, Raman initially seemed like a dangerous, wounded animal, a ticking time bomb ready to explode at any moment. His dark passenger urged him to eliminate Raman, not only to protect himself, but also to end Raman's suffering. Yet, Dexter showed restraint. Instead of viewing Raman as a true threat, Dexter began to see him as a man consumed by emotions he couldn't manage. Raman wasn't a killer. He was a grieving brother struggling to make sense of his world. Dexter recognized that Raman's aggression was a symptom of his pain, not a real danger to him. Choosing not to kill Raman, Dexter instead confronted him in jail, talking him through his rage and encouraging him to face his darkness. Their conversation helped Raman face his own demons, revealing that his anger stemmed from a lifetime in Miguel's shadow. With Miguel gone, Raman realized he needed to let go of his destructive behavior for the sake of his own children. For Dexter, this decision underscored the idea that not every threat needs to be met with violence. Some could be solved with compassion and empathy. Moving on to the final person of this video, Dexter's choice to spare Lumen was a turning point, showing his empathy and sense of justice even within the strict limits of his code. When Dexter killed Boyd Fowler, he wasn't alone. Lumen, one of Boyd's recent captives, had witnessed the act from a doorway. Terrified, she tried to escape, but Dexter quickly intercepted her. Initially, he saw her as a liability, a loose end who could expose his secret, and for a moment, he even considered killing her to protect himself. Lumen didn't fit the code. She hadn't harmed innocents and was a victim herself. Instead of eliminating her, Dexter took a gamble, trusting that she would stay silent. In an unusual act of compassion, he even tended to her wounds and nursed her back to health, showing a rare willingness to let someone else into his guarded world. Over time, Dexter's decision to spare Lumen had a deep impact on him. Driven by a strong need for justice against the men who had brutalized her, Lumen's sense of vengeance resonated with Dexter, who was haunted by his failure to save his late wife, Rita, from a similar fate. The two became allies, hunting down and killing the remaining members of the Barrel Girl gang. Through this partnership, Dexter opened up emotionally in ways he had never before, finding someone who truly understood and shared his darkness for deeply personal reasons. Lumen saw every side of Dexter and accepted him completely, and their bond grew so strong that they eventually became lovers. This relationship marked a major shift in Dexter's character. Instead of seeing himself as a lone, unchangeable force, he began to act from a rare place of emotion. Working with Lumen, Dexter realized that his darkness could serve a greater moral purpose, especially as he struggled with regret over failing to protect Rita. By sparing Lumen and supporting her quest for justice, Dexter took his first step towards compassion. This choice, once a risky gamble, ultimately brought him closer to his own humanity and became one of the most transformative moments of his life. If you want to learn about everyone who knew that Dexter was a serial killer, click on the next video and of course be sure to subscribe.